In the late 1960s, Detroit was locked in a horsepower war. Big blocks ruled the streets. 426 Hemis 427 Fords, Chevy 396 and 454s, huge engines, massive torque, brutal acceleration. Every major manufacturer was chasing the same goal: more cubic inches, more displacement, more raw power. And if you wanted serious performance, everyone believed you needed massive engines under the hood. That was the unwritten rule of the muscle car era. Nobody questioned it. Nobody challenged it. Until 1968. That year, Chrysler quietly released something that completely broke that rule. A small block. Just 340 cubic inches. And somehow, it embarrassed engines nearly twice its size. Most people today remember the Hemi. That was the legend, the king of the muscle car world. But what almost nobody talks about is the small block that scared everyone. The engine that turned lightweight Mopars into street predators. The Dodge 340 V8. And the real story behind it is far crazier than most people realize. Because this engine wasn't supposed to exist. Chrysler never planned to build something like this. And when it did, it became a monster. One that still haunts drag strips and back roads to this day. To understand why the 340 mattered, you have to go back to 1966. At the time, Chrysler already had small block engines, the 273 and the 318 LA Series V8s, reliable engines, affordable, decent performance for the average driver. But they had a serious problem. They couldn't compete with what Chevy and Ford were doing. Chevrolet's 3927 small block was already dominating drag strips across the country. It could rev high. It was surprisingly light. And in L79 trim, it made an incredible 350 horsepower. That was serious power from a small block. Ford's 289 high-performance V8 was powering Shelby Mustangs, lightweight cars with serious speed. Carroll Shelby was winning races and selling dreams. Chrysler needed something similar, something that could compete on the street and the strip. But the company also had another problem. Big blocks like the 383 and 426 Hemi were incredibly powerful. But they were heavy. A Hemi weighed nearly 765 pounds with accessories. That's almost 800 pounds sitting over the front wheels. Drop that into a small car like a Barracuda or Dart, and suddenly the front suspension was struggling just to survive. Handling suffered badly. Weight distribution was terrible. The front tires were constantly overwhelmed. These cars could go fast in a straight line, but ask them to turn a corner, and things got ugly fast. So Chrysler engineers started thinking differently. What if they built a small block that behaved like a big block? What if they could get big block power without big block weight? And that idea became the foundation for the 340. But there was a catch, a big one. To do it, they had to push the limits of the LA small block architecture. They had to take a basic engine design and completely transform it. The result was one of the most overbuilt small blocks Detroit had ever seen. An engine that defied expectations, an engine that rewrote the rules. The Dodge 340 V8 debuted in 1968. Technically, it was part of Chrysler's LA Series engine family. Same basic block design, same general architecture, but internally, it was a completely different animal. The engineers had transformed everything that mattered. The engine used a 4.04-inch bore and a 3.31-inch stroke. That combination created a displacement of exactly 340 cubic inches. Now those numbers might not sound dramatic to a casual observer, but they mattered tremendously. The large 4.04-inch bore was the key to everything. It allowed the engine to breathe freely. Big valves could fit inside the combustion chambers. Large ports could be carved into the heads. And more air meant more power. That's basic physics. Inside the cylinder heads were 2.02-inch intake valves and 1.60-inch exhaust valves. At the time, those were absolutely huge for a small block engine. Most competitors were running much smaller valves. Chrysler's engineers knew that airflow was everything. The compression ratio was a very aggressive 10.5:1. That meant the air-fuel mixture was squeezed incredibly tightly before ignition. More compression meant more power extracted from every drop of fuel, but it also meant the engine demanded premium fuel. Regular gas would cause detonation, knocking, potential engine damage. This was an engine that demanded to be fed properly. Then came the camshaft. This is where Chrysler engineers really showed their intentions. They gave the 340 a seriously aggressive cam profile. More lift, more duration, more overlap between intake and exhaust. The engine could breathe at higher RPM without losing efficiency. And that changed everything about how the 340 performed. Because most small blocks back then ran out of breath around 5,000 RPM. The power curve would flatten out. The engine would feel tired. The 340 didn't do that. It loved revs. It pulled hard all the way to redline. And that's when the real magic happened. Ooh. The official factory rating was 275 horsepower. But here's the funny part. That number was almost certainly a lie. A very strategic lie, a carefully calculated understatement. You see, insurance companies were starting to panic about muscle cars. Accidents were increasing, claims were piling up. Young drivers were wrapping powerful cars around telephone poles. Higher horsepower numbers meant higher insurance rates, and high insurance rates meant fewer sales. Chrysler knew exactly what they were doing. They deliberately understated the power output to keep insurance rates manageable. In reality, many engineers believe the 340 produced closer to 320 horsepower. Some dyno tests suggested even more than that. Independent testing consistently showed numbers well above the factory rating. And torque? Around 340 pound-feet. That's serious pulling power for a small block. But the real advantage wasn't just power, it was weight. The 340 weighed roughly 525 pounds fully dressed. That was over 200 pounds lighter than a Hemi. Think about that for a moment. 200 pounds less sitting over the front wheels. Drop that into a lightweight A-body Mopar, and suddenly you had a rocket that could actually handle. And that's exactly what Chrysler did. In 1970, the Plymouth Duster 340 arrived. A small, lightweight car, just over 3,000 pounds ready to roll. Nothing fancy about the body, just simple functional design. And under the hood, all 340 cubic inches of high-revving fury. On paper, it didn't look intimidating. It looked like an economy car with a stripe package, but on the street, it was devastating. Magazine tests at the time recorded quarter-mile times around 14.0 seconds flat, at roughly 100 mph trap speed. That was faster than many big block muscle cars costing twice as much. Why? Simple physics. Less weight meant quicker acceleration. Higher revs meant the engine stayed in its power band longer. Better balance meant the car hooked up harder on launch. Drivers quickly realized something important. The 340 wasn't just fast in a straight line, it handled better too. The lighter engine meant better weight distribution between front and rear. Cars like the Dodge Dart Swinger 340 and Plymouth Barracuda 340 could corner harder than their big block siblings. They felt alive in ways that nose-heavy big blocks never could. And suddenly, this little small block had a reputation, a dangerous one. Street racers started targeting 340 cars. They looked beatable. They weren't. But there was a problem, a serious one. And it showed up the moment racers started pushing the engine harder. At higher RPM, oil pressure started dropping. That's every engine builder's nightmare. Oil pressure keeps bearings alive. Without proper lubrication, metal touches metal. Heat builds up. Destruction follows quickly. Inside the oil pan of hard-driven 340s, metal shavings began appearing. Bearings were wearing out faster than expected, much faster. One mechanic reportedly looked at a set of destroyed bearings and said, "They looked like charcoal briquettes." Completely roasted. What was happening? The oiling system was the culprit. In the early design, oil flowed to the top of the engine first. The valve train got oil before the crankshaft. That worked fine at normal driving speeds. But at high RPM, the crankshaft needed lubrication the most. It was spinning fastest, generating the most friction, creating the most heat. When it didn't get oil first, the bearings overheated. That could destroy an engine in minutes, sometimes less. Chrysler engineers knew they had to fix this, so they started making improvements. Better oil passages were designed into later blocks. Stronger internals replaced the original components. Forged crankshaft instead of cast. Forged connecting rods instead of powdered metal. Heavy-duty pistons that could handle the punishment. By 1970, the 340 had become incredibly durable. The oiling issues were largely solved. Racers were spinning them to 6,500 RPM, sometimes even 7,000, night after night, run after run, and the engine kept surviving. That's when Mopar fans realized something important. This small block wasn't just quick, it was tough, really tough, built like a tank despite its small displacement, and then Chrysler pushed it even further. In 1970, the company introduced the 340 six-pack. Instead of a single 4-barrel carburetor, the engine now used 3 2-barrel carbs. 2 outer carburetors for the secondary boost when you floored it. 1 center carburetor for cruising and light throttle. The setup dramatically increased airflow at wide-open throttle. More air meant more fuel could be burned. More fuel burned meant more power. Horsepower stayed officially rated at 290. But again, nobody believed that number for a second. With the six-pack setup, some estimates placed real output closer to 330 horsepower, maybe even more depending on the specific car and conditions. And in lightweight cars, like the Dodge Challenger TA and Plymouth Barracuda, the results were absolutely explosive. These cars were built for Trans Am racing homologation. Under SCCA rules, engines had to be based on production blocks under 5.0 liters. That meant no big blocks allowed. The 340 fit perfectly within those regulations. But to make them competitive against Chevy and Ford's purpose-built racing engines, Chrysler created something wild. The 340 six-pack used special cylinder heads, huge ports compared to the standard 340. Better flow throughout the entire intake and exhaust system. A unique intake manifold designed specifically for the triple carburetor setup, and side exit exhaust pipes that dumped right in front of the rear wheels. When drivers hit the throttle, the sound was absolutely insane. 3 carburetors opening simultaneously, air rushing into the engine, exhaust blasting out the sides of the car. It sounded like a full race machine, because essentially it was a barely disguised race car with license plates. And on the track, the 340 proved it could compete with anything. In SCCA Trans Am racing, drivers like Dan Gurney and Sam Posey pushed Mopar's small blocks against Mustangs and Camaros. The competition was absolutely brutal. Every manufacturer wanted to win. Reputations were on the line. Sales depended on Sunday victories. Chevy's 302 Z28 engine was revving to nearly 8,000 RPM. Ford's Boss 302 was doing the same. These were highly developed racing engines with decades of development behind them. But the Mopar 340 had one crucial advantage: torque. While the Chevy and Ford engines were screaming high rev machines that needed to be kept on the boil, the 340 pulled harder out of corners. It made power across a wider RPM range. Drivers didn't have to keep it screaming at redline constantly. That made it incredibly dangerous on tight tracks with lots of corners. Drivers could exit corners faster, accelerate harder without waiting for the revs to climb, put the power down earlier, and that meant shorter lap times. The Mopar teams were competitive despite being newcomers to the series. But then something happened that changed everything. Something nobody could fight against. The muscle car era started collapsing. By 1970, the pressure was coming from everywhere at once. Insurance companies were punishing muscle car owners with rates that made ownership nearly impossible for young buyers. Rates were skyrocketing every year. A young driver trying to insure a 340 might pay more for insurance than the car payment itself. Then came emissions regulations. The government was cracking down on air pollution. The Clean Air Act was reshaping engine design requirements. High compression engines like the 340 suddenly became a serious problem. 10.5:1 compression ratios didn't work well with the new emissions requirements. The engines couldn't run on the unleaded fuel that was coming. Catalytic converters couldn't handle the exhaust from these high compression engines. So Chrysler began detuning the engine. Compression dropped from 10.51 down to 8.5.1. Camshaft timing became milder. Horsepower numbers fell significantly. The wild character of the early 340s started disappearing, and by 1971, the golden era was already fading. The engine still existed, but it wasn't the same animal. The final high-performance 340 engines rolled off assembly lines in 1973. After that, Chrysler replaced it with the 360 small block, a bigger engine with more displacement, more torque at lower RPM, better for everyday driving. But it wasn't the same. The 360 was heavier, less aggressive in character, less rev-happy. It was designed for a different era. The 340's wild personality completely disappeared. Production quietly ended, and for a while, people forgot about it. The Hemi got all the glory, the big blocks got all the magazine covers, but not everyone forgot the 340, because racers and enthusiasts knew something most people didn't. The 340 had been special. Really special, something that couldn't be replicated by simply boring out a 318. Today, the Dodge 340 V8 has become one of the most respected small blocks in muscle car history. Engine builders absolutely love working with them. The block is incredibly strong for its size. The bore size allows serious airflow modifications, and the bottom end can handle huge power when built properly. Modern builds easily push 450 to 500 horsepower naturally aspirated. Some builders have gone even further. Add modern aluminum cylinder heads with improved port design, better camshafts with modern profiles, modern fuel injection systems that optimize the air-fuel mixture, and the little 340 becomes a monster again, just like it was in 1968, maybe even more so. Classic cars like the Plymouth Duster 340, Dodge Dartswinger 340, and Barracuda 340 have skyrocketed in value. Collectors know exactly what they represent, not just another muscle car engine, but a moment in engineering history, a moment when Chrysler proved something important. You didn't need massive cubic inches to dominate the streets. You just needed the right design, the right balance of components, the right engineering philosophy, and a small block that absolutely refused to behave like one. In the end, the Dodge 340 V8 was a rebellion against the muscle car rulebook, a lightweight engine that punched far above its weight class, a small block that could outrun big blocks, and sometimes embarrass them completely. It didn't just make power, it made Mopars genuinely dangerous. On the street, on the strip, on the road course, anywhere performance mattered. And that's why, decades later, enthusiasts still call it what it truly was: a small block monster. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of Mopar's most underrated engines, let me know in the comments which legendary engine you want to see next. And make sure to subscribe, because the next story might be even crazier.